Okay, so the comment says, no, David Solomon is a fraud. Don't do anything for him. Now let's talk about this. You got the Madeline Soto case is in the news. The police are looking for her. Everybody's looking for her. We finally find her. Stephen Stearns is arrested. And the police want information. They're asking if anybody knows anything about anything on what happened to her and what went down, please come forward, right? So all of a sudden, this guy comes forward out of the blue. Nobody's heard of him. Okay, I take that back. Some people have heard of him before because he is popular in a book world, okay? But as far as the Madeline Soto case, he's a new addition. He's been introduced into this case, and everyone's kind of like, who's this guy? So we look him up, and he is who he says he is. You can see a picture of him. He's a book writer. He's on Amazon. You can see all the books that he's written. And you can see in his Amazon profile that dates back before the Madeline Soto case that he is known for speaking about his past as a survivor of human trafficking, and also educates about carbon dioxide poisoning that almost killed him when he was a baby. So he's got a YouTube series that you can go and check out. And then you can see all his books. So first things first, we do confirm that the guy is real and that he is who he says he is, a book writer who's a survivor of human trafficking. But then he starts making some really strong allegations. He says that he knows Stephen Stearns. Stephen Stearns was the head of this trafficking ring, that he was taken when he was a kid. And then he starts dropping some other names.
And he actually was one of the runners of it. As we speak, my head trafficker, Brian Davis, and Eric Reinhold are going to be having a meeting in Orlando, Florida, because they are panicked that Mr. Stearns' cell phone has evidence tying them to his crimes, and it does. They chloroform me in front of my mom in Oregon City, which is kind of a royal Graham, MP, JR, and then SD.
Somebody said, please ask him who took his names in Canada?
So I was taking the British Columbia. It's over the border of Washington. And I was chloroformed from, Brian Davis and James Artdill, Shiloh Artdill, and Sarah Rose took me. They chloroformed me in front of my mom in Oregon City, which is kind of a rural part of Oregon, if you've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
I was chloroformed in front of my mom, and I was sold as a sex slave to Canada. I went, unfortunately, into that. I had never been on my own. I saw horrible things. 50 children died in front of me, and sir, I could not do a darn thing about it.
So he starts dropping a lot of names, and he makes some serious allegations saying that they chloroformed him, they took him, and they took him to another country, took him to Canada. So I wanted to start looking into these people. So I looked into Brian Davis first because that was the first name that he had dropped. And if you look through the thumbnails, there's a couple of videos on Brian Davis, and you can see exactly the type of person that Brian Davis is, and you can make your own judgment on the type of person that Brian Davis is. But basically what we found is that he did an interview where he tells people, here.
Tried to reach out to them in other ways too, besides the books. You know that they're connected to the internet, and so you've used that as a tool to talk to them. Tell me about that.
Yes, I have a very active message form. We've had over 1 million messages posted over the years, and I private message with the kids and help them with their problems. They're writing to me about pornography and cutting and all the things that kids are going through. What do I do about this? My parents aren't Christians.
Okay, so through our investigation, we found that this guy writes children's books. The books are, he writes about a dragon that enslaves basically human children, and they are basically trafficked by the dragons. And they have to try and escape this, situation where they're being taken by dragons, and it's very weird. Anyways, so we can see he's got a message forum. So I actually did join the message forum, and I did log into the account, create an account and all that. And you can actually, just like he said, it's like its own little social media thing, but it's off the grid. Like, it's almost like a dark web type of social media where kids go on and share their problems and talk about things that children shouldn't be talking to strange adults in private messages about. He's a youth pastor. Here's a one of his youth pastor meetings where he's talking to a youth group.
She was 16 or 17. She was being sexually abused by her father and threatened. If you ever tell your mother, I'll kill you or whatever they do. And then she saw signs that he was about to start on her younger sister. And one night she was just weeping, all alone, had just been abused. And she looked up at her bookshelf and saw my books up there. She said to herself, what would bind?
So he's talking to this group of youth about how if they're in an abusive situation that they should use his books and come to him for help, and he'll help them get out of that type of situation, is what he's implying to me. So this doesn't really confirm anything that David Solomon has said. We're just getting a little insight as to who these people are that he's accusing. So then there's the Eric Reinhold guy, and I look him up, and he's got an Amazon profile and he writes books as well. So he has a lot of reviews, and one review he talks about how they took in a woman from Egypt. He writes this review and he says his book was so timely for my wife and me. We had just hosted an Egyptian woman that is currently living in Bahrain who had stories about persecution of Christians, and she was living in the life of a Muslim woman, and this was very hard for her. So this book helped him to be able to relate to her. Okay, so here he talks about heaven and Heaven for Kids and how much he absolutely loves these books. So he can't say enough about the book Heaven, by it, period, the most important book ever. And Heaven for Kids is very similar, but when you go in and read, the book description, it says, don't read it to your kids unless you've read Heaven first for adults. And then you, as the adult, are supposed to help your kid to read and understand this book, Heaven. So if you look into Randy Alcorn and the book Heaven, the thing that sets his book apart and his description of heaven apart from other books is that when you go to heaven in his book, you still have your body, however you died. So if you're a child, you died like a child. If you're an adult, you died like an adult. Well, let's read the description here. Scripture describes as a bright and vibrant and physical new earth, free from sin, suffering, and death, and brimming with Christ's presence. So he talks about how in heaven it's going to be free from sin. We can basically do whatever we want, and it just won't be sinful. Like here on earth, everything we do that's that we indulge in our temptations with is sin. But in heaven, there's no such thing as sin, so we can indulge in all our temptations, and it'll never be sinful because sin doesn't exist in heaven. But we still have all of our bodies, but we don't wear clothes in heaven because, we go back to like the time of Adam and Eve, and we're all naked in heaven, and we're all just lustful and enjoying all of the sinful pleasures that we can't enjoy here on earth. And you guys can look into this. This is all in the book. You can read the book yourself. So then I want to go to the next guy, who's James Art Villa. Now, that's the guy that he actually said took him. Now, let's keep in mind that this was the guy who actually shared the YouTube video of Brian Davis, where he's talking about a 17-year-old girl that he knew that he had taken in, basically, that had been abused sexually. And he talks about how he uses these books to reel in and help people, right? It all kind of goes in this circle of we start out with a website, we're talking to kids, we find out the kids that are having problems at home, we private message them, we use the book to build relationships with them, to get them to have courage to leave their abusive situations or their situations where maybe, mom is dying of cancer. And that's okay, but you can come with us and we'll take care of you. They target kids that are already going through either loss or death or abuse. So, I made other videos about these people that you can go back and watch. We're going to go ahead and get into James Artville and his story because he actually did go live with Gray Hughes on, one of his episodes, or, Gray Hughes recorded a phone conversation that he played between him and James Artville. And I want to compare James Artville's story to David Solomon's story because both those stories seem to align. And James Artville does confirm a lot of what David Solomon said. So for part 2 and keep watching.